She was mocked for her size, but the giant rancher built a porch just for her chair. The wagon creaked to a stop in front of the general store, the horses snorting in the noon heat, and every voice in the street seemed to hush at once. The woman inside, Martha Lee, sat still for a moment, gripping the folded letter in her hand until the paper softened with sweat. She had imagined this arrival differently, maybe with a smile, maybe with someone waiting. But when she stepped down, the wood groaned under her weight, and that sound was all it took for the whispers to start. "Mail-order bride from Kansas," someone said. "They say the train near broke carrying her." Laughter rippled like wind through dry grass. Martha didn't look up. She just adjusted her shawl and held her chin high, her blue eyes steady, her breath even. She had lived long enough to know how to stand when the world wanted her to shrink. The letter in her hand had promised a ranch, a man named Abel Thorne, and a chance at quiet work, not charity, not love, just peace. But as she looked around, no one stepped forward. The postmaster shifted behind his counter, uneasy. "You Miss Lee?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Mr. Thorne sent for me." "He did," the man said, glancing toward the door. "But he ain't come to town yet. He's a big fella, keeps to himself." "That makes two of us," she said softly. She found a bench near the store wall, sat down slowly, and unfolded the letter again. The ink was faded, but she knew every word. "I need someone who can cook, tend the books, and talk plain. My porch faces the west, so it gets lonely by sundown." It wasn't poetry, but it was honest. She liked honest. The crowd drifted back to their chores, though the stares lingered. A group of boys snickered from the edge of the well. Martha ignored them. She had learned to turn shame into silence and silence into armor. The sound of hooves came from the road then, slow, heavy, deliberate. A shadow crossed the ground beside her, long and solid. When she looked up, she saw him. Abel Thorne, larger than any man she'd ever seen, broad as the wagon door, his shirt sleeves rolled, his hands rough and clean. His eyes, the color of earth after rain, met hers with a calm that didn't flinch. "You Martha?" he asked. "I am. You been waiting long?" "Long enough to see what kind of place this is." He nodded once, glancing at the people, pretending not to watch. "They talk too much," he said. "They always have. I'm used to that." "You shouldn't have to be." She looked at him carefully. "You wrote about a porch that faces west," she said. "Still does," he said. "Only thing it's missing is a chair that fits the person sitting in it." The words caught her off guard. "You build porches for everyone you meet?" "Just the ones the world forgets to make room for." He reached for her trunk as if it weighed nothing, then turned toward his horse. "Come on," he said. "Sun's dropping. I don't like when it sets before folks get home." Martha followed, her throat tight but her step steady. The laughter behind her faded with distance, replaced by the soft rhythm of hooves on dirt. When she looked up at the horizon, the sky was open and gold, wide enough to hold every piece of her the world had once tried to hide. The ride to the ranch was long, the kind that measured distance not in miles but in silence. The road wound through stretches of grass and red earth, the sky so wide it made her chest ache. Abel drove steady, his hands sure on the reins, saying little but glancing at her now and then, as if to make sure she was still breathing. She watched him from the corner of her eye, the way his shoulders moved like part of the landscape, how his quiet wasn't heavy but patient. When they crested the last hill, she saw it, a cabin with a wide porch facing west, just like the letter said. It wasn't grand, but it stood like something meant to last. "This is home?" she asked softly. "If you want it to be," he said. He helped her down, his hands gentle, never hurried. The boards beneath her feet creaked, and she froze. Shame flashing through her like lightning. But Abel didn't look away. "Needs fixing," he said. "Been meaning to rebuild this porch anyway." She followed him inside, the smell of pine and coffee grounding her. The room was plain, one table, 2 chairs, and a stove humming with warmth. "You can rest," he said. "Long road from Kansas." She sat, the chair groaning beneath her, but his eyes stayed calm. "I'm stronger than I look," she said quietly. "So's the chair," he answered. That made her laugh. Small, surprised, real. He smiled too, the kind of smile that wasn't trying to impress anyone. He poured her coffee, black and strong, and they sat for a long time without needing words. Outside, the wind brushed through the cottonwoods, and the light began to soften. "You live alone?" she asked finally. "Mostly," he said. "Lost my folks young. Tried ranching, tried drinking, tried running. This is what's left. And now you're building porches." "Now I'm building places people don't have to hide to sit," he said. Her throat tightened. "You think I've been hiding?" "No," he said. "I think the world made you." She looked away, blinking hard, the coffee trembling in her hand. "You talk like a preacher." "No," he said, "just someone who's been talked down to enough to know better." Dusk settled like a blanket, the golden light pouring across the porch. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll cut new boards, strong ones." "You don't have to do that for me." "I ain't," he said, meeting her eyes. "I'm doing it for the woman who's going to sit there and make this place look like it's worth something again." The words sank deep, settling in the places she'd kept locked. "I don't know if I can be that," she whispered. "You already are," he said simply. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and sage, and she looked out the window toward the porch, imagining it rebuilt, wide, welcoming, made for her chair in the sunset. For the first time, the word home didn't sound like a dream someone else owned. It sounded like something she could build. The next morning broke clean and bright, sunlight spilling through the cabin window in soft gold stripes. Abel was already outside when Martha woke, sleeves rolled, a hammer in his hand, and a pile of fresh-cut boards stacked nearby. She stepped to the doorway, her shawl drawn tight around her shoulders, watching him move with steady rhythm. Measured swings, nails driven with purpose, no wasted motion. Each strike sounded like certainty, the kind she hadn't known in years. "You start before breakfast?" she called. "Can't build on an empty stomach," he said, smiling without stopping. "But I can think better when I'm hungry." "You'll eat when I say," she said, her voice firm enough to surprise them both. He chuckled. "Fair enough, Miss Lee." She brought him bread and coffee, setting it on the porch rail. "You don't have to do this so soon," she said. "I've been meaning to since last winter," he replied. "Guess I just needed the right reason." "And that reason is me." "No," he said. "It's the look you had when the boards creaked. A porch ought to hold whoever stands on it." She stood quiet for a long moment, watching the sunlight play across his face. There was no pity in his tone, no softness that made her small. Only care, the kind that built rather than repaired. "You ever build for yourself?" she asked. "Used to," he said. "Then I figured out there's more peace in building for someone else." She smiled faintly. "You talk like a man who's been alone too long." "Maybe," he said, "but I ain't lonely right now." She felt warmth rise in her chest at that, something fragile but growing. The hours passed, slow and good. She helped where she could, holding boards, fetching nails, humming an old hymn her mother used to sing. He worked beside her without comment, as if her presence was already part of the plan. When the sun climbed high, he straightened and wiped his brow. "Go on inside," he said. "You'll burn." "You'll burn first," she said. "Your skin's the color of a saddle already." He laughed, and she smiled wider than she meant to. By late afternoon, the new porch stood strong, its boards smooth and wide, the rail thick enough to lean on without fear. Abel stepped back, hands on his hips, admiring the work. "Well?" he asked. Martha stepped onto it carefully, the boards firm beneath her boots. "Feels like it's listening," she said. "That's what wood does," he replied. "Listens and remembers." "Then it's the first thing out here that hasn't judged me." "It never will," he said. "Neither will I." Her breath caught, and she looked away toward the horizon where the wheat shimmered in the late light. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not for the porch, for seeing me as something worth building around." He leaned against the post, his gaze steady. "Didn't take building to see that, Martha. Just took meeting you." The sky had turned the color of honey by then, and she sat down in her chair, the one she'd carried all the way from Kansas, and let the quiet settle around her. Abel leaned on the railing beside her, the boards creaking under his weight, but not bending, not once. "You hear that?" he asked. "What?" "The sound of something that don't break easy." She nodded, her eyes wet. "Maybe that's us." He didn't answer, just watched the sun sink west, the world gilded in gold, and for the first time in her life, Martha Lee felt that the ground beneath her was built to hold her exactly as she was. By the third day, the porch smelled of fresh cedar and morning coffee, and the small ranch finally felt alive again. Martha sat in her chair watching Abel saddle his horse for town, sunlight glinting on the brass buckle of his belt. "You sure you don't mind me staying here while you're gone?" she asked. "Only thing I'd mind is you not staying," he said, tying the strap with one clean pull. "You lock the door if strangers ride through, and don't let anyone talk you into thinking you owe them company." "I've been told worse," she said, smiling. "And believed it?" "Sometimes." "Don't," he said, "not anymore." He mounted his horse and tipped his hat, back before sundown. She watched him ride down the trail until the dust swallowed him, then turned back toward the porch. The valley was still, only the hum of bees and the whisper of cottonwoods filling the quiet. For the first time in years, she felt useful. She swept the porch, baked cornbread, even cleaned the shelf that had gone untouched since his mother's passing. When Abel returned near dusk, he found her standing by the railing, apron dusted with flour, her cheeks warm with color. "You've been working," he said, dismounting. "I don't sit easy when there's things that need doing. Then we'll get along fine." He climbed the steps and looked around. "You cleaned the shelf." "It wanted to be seen again," she said, "just like everything else around here." He smiled at that, but before he could reply, a voice called from the road. "Thorne, you finally took yourself a bride?" Abel turned. Two ranch hands from town sat grinning on their horses, whiskey bold and mean with boredom. "Wasn't sure the boards would hold," one said. "Guess you built them special." The laughter that followed scraped against the air like rust. Martha froze, the old ache returning sharp and fast. Abel's face changed, not red with anger, but pale with fury so quiet it scared the men more than shouting would have. He stepped forward, his boots heavy on the boards. "You can say what you want about me," he said evenly, "but you don't speak her name unless it's got respect wrapped around it." "Easy, Thorne," one said. "We're just having fun." "Then ride on and find it elsewhere." The men shifted, glancing at each other, then spat in the dirt and turned their horses. When they were gone, the silence hung heavy. Martha kept her eyes on the horizon. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. "I did," he said. "You've had enough men talking like you weren't there." "And what about you?" she asked softly. "You act like it doesn't bother you that they see me the way they do." "I don't see you the way they do," he said. "Never have, never will." She looked at him then, tears slipping free despite her will. "Why?" "Because I learned a long time ago that weight don't break wood. It breaks hearts when folks stop believing they deserve to stand somewhere." She reached for his hand and he let her take it. "You ever get tired of carrying the world for people who don't know they're worth it?" she asked. "No," he said, "because sometimes they start believing it when you don't let go." The wind rose gently, carrying the scent of sawdust and bread, and for the first time, the air between them didn't feel borrowed. It felt like belonging. The next morning dawned soft and golden, sunlight spilling over the porch boards Abel had built and pooling beneath Martha's chair like a quiet blessing. She sat there with a cup of coffee warming her hands, watching him mend the gate by the corral. Each strike of his hammer echoed with something steady and sure, and she realized she'd begun to measure safety by the sound of his work. "You always fix what isn't broken?" she called. "Only the things that been hurt and learned to hide it," he said without looking up. "That gate swings fine." "So do you," he said, smiling under his breath. "Just needed someone to oil the hinges." The words caught her off guard, and she felt the laugh rise before she could stop it. It wasn't dainty or shy. It was full, rich, alive, and it startled a bird from the railing, sending it flying into the clear blue. Abel looked up, and for a heartbeat, the whole world seemed to pause. "You should do that more often," he said. "Laugh. Remind the air who it belongs to." She looked away, cheeks warm. "You talk like a man who's never been laughed at." "Plenty have tried," he said. "Stopped caring the day I realized most folks only mock what they wish they could understand." She traced her finger along the edge of her cup, feeling the smoothness of it, the weight that matched her own. "You don't look at me like they do," she said quietly. "That's because I ain't them." "Then what do you see?" He stood, brushing dust from his hands, and walked up to the porch. The boards held under his steps, steady and strong. He stopped beside her chair, his shadow stretching long across the floorboards. "I see a woman built from more than bone and skin," he said softly. "I see patience where most folks got pride. I see someone who fills a room without saying a word." She swallowed hard. "You make me sound like something carved." "You are," he said, "by every cruel word that didn't kill you." She didn't speak. The air around them seemed to listen. He reached down and touched the arm of her chair. "This," he said, "wasn't built to hold you. It was built to prove you belong wherever you sit." "You built it," she whispered. "I built it because I needed to believe in what it meant," he said. "You gave it meaning." Her eyes filled and she looked out at the open land, the wheat bending softly in the breeze. "All my life they made me smaller," she said. "You make me taller without moving an inch." "That's how a porch ought to work," he said. "You sit and the world looks different." She smiled through her tears. "You ever get tired of being right?" "Only when no one's listening." "Then I'll listen," she said. "Every day." He nodded, stepping back as she rocked gently in her chair. The boards creaked, not weak, not strained, just alive. The sound of strength, not weight, the sound of something built to last. The wind carried it down the valley, past the cottonwoods, past the edge of old judgment, until it became part of the land itself, a rhythm of grace in a world that too often forgot how to hold what was beautiful. Abel leaned against the post, arms folded, watching her in silence. She turned her face toward the light and said, "It feels like the porch was waiting for me." "It was," he said. "So was I." By the next afternoon, the weather turned gray, the kind of quiet storm that moves without thunder, but carries a weight of its own. Martha sat in her chair, the sky spilling a thin, steady rain across the fields. The boards of the porch darkened, glistening under the drizzle, and she thought about how even water seemed to respect the place Abel had built, falling soft, never loud enough to break it. He came out carrying his coat but didn't put it on, sitting on the step beside her, his boots leaving wet prints that steamed in the cool air. "You'll catch cold," she said. "Then I'll sit closer to the fire later," he replied. "You ever notice rain makes the world quiet enough to hear what it's been holding back?" "Sometimes quiet's too honest," she said. "It tells you things you'd rather forget." He nodded slowly, watching the drops fall from the porch rail. "You been thinking about what those men said?" She hesitated, then sighed. "You can't build wood thick enough to stop words from echoing." "Maybe not," he said. "But you can build something stronger to drown them out." "Like what?" "A life." She turned to him, surprised by the certainty in his tone. "You really think I can build one?" "Already have," he said. "You just haven't named it yet." The rain grew heavier, a slow rhythm on the roof. Martha wrapped the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said. "Took me years to stop seeing myself through other people's eyes. Still fails me some mornings." What helped? The sound of something that didn't care who I was. Wind, water, wood, they just kept being what they were. She smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'll start there." He looked at her, rain dripping from his hair, his expression caught between admiration and ache. "You already did," he said. "You sat down." She laughed softly. "You think sitting's an act of courage?" "When the world tells you to disappear," he said. "Yes." They sat without speaking for a while, the sound of the rain filling the spaces where shame used to live. The air smelled of wet pine and soil, and when lightning flickered in the far hills, it illuminated the edges of her face, the curve of her cheek, the strength in her jaw. Abel saw beauty there, not because it defied the world's cruelty, but because it didn't need to. "You ever regret coming here?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," she said. "Then I remember the sound of your hammer hitting those boards. And it feels like you were building a place for me to breathe again." His throat tightened. "That's all I ever wanted to build." The rain softened then, a fine mist settling over everything. She reached out, letting her fingers rest on the rail beside his. "You don't have to keep proving you're kind," she said. "I see it without the nails and wood." "And you don't have to keep apologizing for taking up space," he said. "You fill the porch just right." She looked out at the horizon where the clouds began to break, pale light pushing through. "The sun's coming back," she said. Always does, he replied. You just got to sit still long enough to watch it return. When the first rays broke through, touching the wet boards with gold, she whispered, "Then I guess I'll stay right here." He smiled. "Good. That's where you belong." The rain ended, but neither of them moved, both knowing the world had changed without needing to say how. The days that followed were gentle ones, stitched together by sunlight and routine. The porch dried clean, and Abel painted the new boards with a thin coat of oil that glowed like honey in the afternoon. Martha watched him from her chair, mending a shirt that had lost 2 buttons. The world seemed quieter now, or maybe they had both learned how to listen differently. "You work like you're trying to teach the wood patience," she said. "Wood's already patient," he answered, smiling. "I'm the one trying to catch up." "You ever stop working?" "Only when I find something better worth my hands." She raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "Right now?" "Coffee." She laughed, and he grinned at the sound, the same way he did each time she forgot to be cautious. When she poured him a cup, he took it like it was worth more than gold. They drank together on the steps, the air warm with the smell of summer and wild sage. "I used to think quiet was loneliness," she said. "Now it feels like company." "That's what happens when it's shared," he said. She looked down at her hands, strong hands, wide palms, the kind that had always been called too much of something. "I've spent most of my life being told I took up too much space." Abel leaned back on his elbows. "Then the world was built too small." She blinked at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You talk like a man who never doubted himself." "You'd be wrong," he said. "I used to think being big meant I had to break things just to prove I was strong. Now I know strength's in building what others can rest against." She studied him for a long moment. "And this porch, is that what you built for me?" "No," he said softly. "I built it for us. You just gave it purpose." A silence settled between them, easy and full. She rocked gently, the chair creaking like a slow heartbeat. "Abel, you ever think love's supposed to feel like fireworks?" "Maybe when you're young," he said. "Then life teaches you it's supposed to feel like breathing." She smiled. "Then this must be it." "This? The breathing kind?" He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the wheat shimmered gold. "Then I reckon we've both been holding our breath too long." She reached out and laid her hand over his. The warmth of it startled her, solid, safe, alive. "I don't know how to thank you for what you've given me," she said. "You already did," he said. "You sat down and stayed." The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of oil and pine. Somewhere in the distance a meadowlark sang, its song clear as light through glass. Martha looked out at the fence he'd mended, the fields rolling beyond, the porch strong beneath her. "You know what I think?" she said. "What's that?" "I think the porch isn't what holds the house up." "No, it's what holds the people together." Abel smiled, his voice low. "Then I guess we built it right." She leaned back in her chair, feeling the boards beneath her, feeling the sun trace her face, and for the first time in her life, she didn't worry about how the world saw her, because for the first time, the world, or at least one good man in it, had decided to look properly. It was Saturday when the town decided to remember her again. Martha was shelling peas on the porch, while Abel brushed down his horse when a small wagon rolled up the trail, the clatter of wheels carrying voices she didn't expect to hear. Mrs. Darnell from the general store sat up front, flanked by 2 of the women who had laughed that first day. Their faces were polite now, but Martha could see the kind of curiosity that still had sharp edges. "Afternoon," Mrs. Darnell called, her smile practiced. "We thought we'd stop by, see how you were settling." Martha glanced at Abel, who gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "You decide who gets your piece." She set her bowl aside and stood, the porch creaking softly beneath her boots. "I'm settling fine," she said. "The land's kind and the company's better." The women exchanged glances, their eyes sliding past her to the house, to the porch, to Abel. "Well, Mr. Thorne," one of them said too sweetly, "you've done quite a bit of work since spring. That porch looks near new." "It is," he said evenly. "Built it special." "For her?" another asked, the question dripping with what she didn't say. "For anyone who needs to sit without apology," he replied. Mrs. Darnell blinked, caught off guard. Well, that's how generous of you. Not generosity, Abel said. Decency. Martha felt warmth bloom under her ribs, the kind that had nothing to do with the sun. She folded her hands calmly. Would you like some water before heading back? No, thank you, Mrs. Darnell said quickly. We just wanted to see that you were comfortable. I am, Martha said, her voice clear. Very. The silence that followed stretched long enough for the breeze to speak. The women fidgeted, unsure how to leave gracefully. Finally, Mrs. Darnell tugged the reins. Well, we'll be on our way. You take care now. I've been doing that my whole life, Martha said softly. Abel watched the wagon roll away until it was a speck on the horizon. Then he turned to her, his eyes amused. You handled that better than I would have. I didn't have to swing a hammer this time, she said, smiling. Just used the one in my words. Hit true, he said. She sat back down in her chair, the porch warm beneath her feet. It's funny, she murmured. They came to see if I'd changed, but I think I'm just finally not pretending anymore. You never needed to change, he said. You just needed somewhere solid to stand. And someone who didn't flinch when I did. That helps too, he said, grinning. She tossed him a pea pod and he caught it with a laugh. You think they'll keep talking? She asked. Let them, he said. Stories don't hurt once you start telling your own. She looked out over the fields, where the sun poured itself across the grass like gold melting into green. You think someday they'll understand? Maybe, he said. But by then it won't matter. She nodded, the breeze brushing her cheek like a quiet hand. I never thought being seen could feel this peaceful. That's because you were always looking at the wrong crowd, he said. She smiled, leaning back as the boards hummed softly under her. And you? She asked. You ever get tired of building? Not when what I build gets to smile like that, he said. The wind carried her laughter across the valley, bright and full, and this time, the world didn't dare laugh back. Autumn came slow that year, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. The fields turned amber, the air thinned, and the evening stretched longer with the smell of wood smoke and coffee. Martha sat on the porch every sunset, her chair creaking in rhythm with the cooling wind, while Abel lit the lamp that hung near the door. You don't need to light that every night, she said once. I like the dark. Maybe, he said, striking the match, but light gives folks a reason to find their way home. She watched him move, the flame reflecting in his eyes, steady and golden. You think I'd ever leave? No, he said, but the world's wide, and I ain't about to let it forget where you belong. The wind stirred the curtains behind her, carrying the faint sound of coyotes across the ridge. You ever get tired of making everything mean something? She asked. Only when people forget that it does, he said. She smiled. You sound like my father. He was a good man. No, she said quietly, but he had a good heart once. He just didn't know how to use it. Abel sat beside her on the steps, the light pooling between them. Then maybe that's what you're doing for me, he said, showing me how. I think you already knew, she said. You just needed someone to remind you it mattered. He leaned back, the boards sighing beneath his weight. Funny, he said. I thought I built this porch for you. You did, she said, but it's fixing both of us. He chuckled low. Never thought wood and nails could do all that. They can't, she said softly, but mercy can. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was warm. She reached out and touched his sleeve, her fingers tracing the rough fabric. You know, she said, I used to hate the sound of my own name. Now, when you say it, it feels like it's worth answering. He met her eyes, and for a moment she saw every quiet kindness he had ever held back, every word he'd never needed to speak. Martha, he said, barely above a whisper. She smiled, the kind that carried more truth than years of speech. That's the one, she said. The lamp flickered as the wind shifted, light brushing across their faces like memory. Tomorrow I'll fix the roof, he said suddenly. It don't need fixing. Doesn't matter, he said. It's a way to keep working near you. She shook her head, laughing softly. You ever stop building, Abel Thorne? When I run out of reasons. And how many reasons do you have left? He looked at her for a long moment, the light painting gold across his jaw. Just one. And what's that? You. Her breath caught, Not because of the words, but because of how quietly he said them, like a truth that had always existed and only just found its voice. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the valley, the lamp's glow spilling into the night, making the porch look like the heart of the world. "You ever think we could start over?" she said. "We already did," he replied. The wind died down then, leaving only the sound of the lamp's flame. She reached over, her hand resting on his, their fingers interlocking as if they'd been built that way from the start. "Don't let the light go out," she whispered. "Never will," he said. And in that moment, surrounded by quiet fields and the slow breath of the earth, she realized that love wasn't something loud or sudden. It was a lamp burning steady on a porch built to last. The first snow came early that year, drifting down like feathers, soft and slow, wrapping the valley in silence. The porch groaned beneath the weight, but the boards held firm, each one darkened by the damp gleaming under the pale light of dawn. Martha woke to the sound of Abel splitting wood outside, every strike echoing steady as a heartbeat. She pulled on her shawl and stepped onto the porch, her breath turning to clouds in the cold air. "You'll freeze out here," she called. "Then I'll freeze doing something worth the warmth," he said, his voice easy. She smiled and sat in her chair, the one that had become as much a part of her as the ground beneath it. The world was white and clean, the kind of morning that erased the sharp edges of everything that came before. "You ever think the world looks kinder in snow?" she asked. "Maybe it just hides what's cruel for a while," he said, carrying another log to the pile. "Or maybe it's giving us a blank page," she said, "so we can write something new." He paused, axe in hand, the light catching in his hair. "Then I guess this porch is our first chapter." She laughed softly. "And this chair's my favorite line." He came to stand beside her, his shadow falling over the boards, his breath mingling with hers in the cold. "You know," he said, "I used to think home was something you had to earn, something the world gave when you'd done enough right to deserve it. And now? Now I think home's something you build when you stop running from what you already are." She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "Then you built me one." "No," he said, kneeling beside her. "We built it together." She reached out and touched his cheek, her fingers warm against his cold skin. "You ever wish you'd done things different?" "Not if they led here," he said. "You?" "Not anymore," she whispered. The snow fell harder then, blanketing the rail, dusting her hair, softening the world into something sacred. "Abel," she said quietly, "I used to pray for someone to see me, but I think maybe the better prayer was to see myself again." "And?" "You answered it," she said, without even knowing. His eyes met hers, deep and steady. "You don't fix what was never broken, Martha. You just remind it how to stand." She smiled through tears, the kind that didn't hurt. "Then stand with me," she said. "As long as there's a porch under us," he replied. They stayed like that until the sun began to rise, gold bleeding through the gray sky, turning the snow into rivers of light. The lamp by the door still burned, faint but alive, its flame steady against the cold. Abel looked at it, and then at her. "Told you I wouldn't let it go out," he said. "Good," she said, "because I'm not leaving this chair." "Wouldn't want you to," he said. "It belongs here. So do you." The wind carried their laughter down the valley, where the sound of it mixed with the crack of ice breaking in the river and the first call of a bird too stubborn to fly south. The world felt smaller then, but safer, like the kind of place made not by land or walls, but by hands that had finally stopped shaking. Martha leaned back, her chair creaking softly, her eyes following the light spilling across the boards he'd built, and she whispered, "It's enough." Abel stood beside her looking out at the endless white and said, "It always was. If this story reminded you that love isn't found, it's built board by board, word by word, with the kind of mercy that holds steady through every season, then share it so someone else remembers too. Subscribe to Redemption West, where every wound finds a home, every silence learns to speak, and every story proves that grace doesn't whisper. It builds.